My fiancé was having an affair behind my back. Just when I was about to confront him, a boy carrying a woven sack suddenly moved into the servants' quarters. I asked, "Who is he?" The butler respectfully replied, "Miss, this is the newcomer President Lin found for you. A ritual marriage for dispelling misfortune. He said this boy can replace young Master Sunday. Let him stay next door to me," I said indifferently, tossing out all of Anthony's son's belongings. Chapter 01. Standing at the doorway was a boy in a plain shirt and trousers, holding a bulging woven sack. But he stood very properly, tall and thin, his back straight. His whole body looked clean and neat. Even the pair of old sneakers on his feet had been scrubbed white. The butler introduced him to me. "Miss, this is Oscar, brought back from Peach Blossom Village by President Lin. His school transfer has already been arranged. Starting tomorrow, he will attend Spring Breeze Academy with you." I gazed at this stranger called Oscar. His features were smooth and handsome, his eyes clear and pure. Even shabby clothes could not conceal the noble, refined look of his face. He smiled while asking something of the auntie at his side. After confirming he would not dirty the floor, he stepped inside and changed his shoes. His brows curved, his eyes lifted at the corners. When he smiled, he reminded one inexplicably of a summer glass of sparkling water filled with ice cubes, bubbling, refreshing, thirst-quenching. He was the person my mother had brought back. I suddenly asked, "Then, can he replace Anthony?" Anthony and I had been betrothed since childhood. In name he was my fiancé. But in reality, during a time when my family was worried sick about me, they sought out a fortune-teller who calculated that Anthony was my destined protector. I had been frail since birth, suffering from congenital heart disease. I could die at any time. Anthony's fate pattern was said to complement mine. If he remained closely bound to me, it would prolong my life. The Lin family granted the Sun family immense benefits. So the Sun family sent Anthony to the Lin family for a ritual marriage for dispelling misfortune. The butler hesitated, choosing his words carefully. President Lin means that Oscar can replace young Master Sun, but the two do not conflict. If you still like young Master Sun. Like I did not even bother to lift my eyelids. Thinking of the scene where Anthony kissed that deskmate of his in the classroom, a nauseating stickiness instantly welled up inside me. The boy downstairs seemed to notice my gaze. He looked up, and when his eyes met mine, he froze for a moment. From above, I looked down at him, watched as he shyly set down the woven sack in his hand, bowed to me, and then gave me a smile after rising. It was like spring returning to the green fields, a sight full of ease and brightness, a kind of vigorous vitality. And just like that, the itch in my throat was effortlessly dispelled. Chapter 02. Oscar was assigned to the servants' quarters downstairs. I told them to move him next to me. I said, "Come see me after you've tidied up." The room next door had originally been Anthony's. The butler hurried up to support me cautiously. "Miss, what about young Master Sun's things?" "Thrown away," I said flatly. "Since there's a replacement, the Lin family doesn't need him anymore." Oscar didn't have many belongings. The butler said that after he set down that woven sack, he only asked whether he could take a bath first. Perhaps bath was too grand a word. He merely rinsed off with cold water, and when he came out, the ends of his hair still dripped and he shivered. The set of new clothes Oscar changed into was actually a bit worn, but it looked like his newest outfit, at least with no patches. You could tell this was the fullest preparation Oscar could imagine making before meeting me. I smelled a faint soap scent on him, rough but natural. His Mandarin wasn't standard. Still, he tried to enunciate properly as he greeted me. "Benefactor, I finally see you." Those black eyes were bright and clear, untouched by dust. The sunlight of them was unspoiled. He looked at me with devotion and focus, as if gazing at a shrine statue. "Benefactor," I said, my tone very flat. "You were simply sold to me." That meant, from now until my death, he would lose his freedom and stay by my side. There was no difference from Anthony. My answer seemed to stump Oscar. But after only a few seconds he replied, "But I don't deserve such a price." The sentence sounded like an immediate rebuttal of himself. Yet his expression contained no self-pity. Oscar smiled again, his brows curved, the corners of his eyes lifting, a very boyish smile. In the photo in the file, he smiled like that too. A clean, refreshing smile that made the world feel clear. He said, "You built the school so I could keep studying. You saved my brother and gave him medical care I could never have earned in a lifetime. You took me away from Peach Blossom Village. I never imagined I'd see what's outside the village. I never thought I'd get to meet you." Oscar crouched down and looked up at me, his tone serious. "Among so many people being chosen by you, being bought by you, it's my good fortune." He seemed obedient, like a puppy that very much wanted its head patted. I frowned slightly, puzzled. I didn't understand why he could smile. Clearly he lived in mud. His life at a single glance seemed to have no future. Chapter 03. I had read Oscar's file. 3 sparse lines sketching a life of bleak hardship. His family was too poor. His parents left to work and never returned. His grandfather raised him alone, then died 2 years ago from overwork. Oscar was forced to drop out of school, nursing his seriously ill little brother while doing whatever he could to earn money for the medicine. Later, my mother went to Peach Blossom Village to run a charity project and establish a school, and she found him. Over the years, she and my father ran everywhere, one looking for the best medical team for me, the other setting up various charity projects in my name. Oliver and Clara were not superstitious people before. But when things human hands couldn't fix stared them in the face, when I first slipped into the intensive care unit and lay unconscious, with doctors around the world at a loss, they began to pray to gods and Buddhas to do as many good deeds as possible, hoping fortune would fall on me to believe in so-called metaphysics. They even called in masters and started believing in ideas like marriage for fortune, searching everywhere for people whose fate patterns matched mine. The algorithm for a fate pattern is extremely complex. There are very few who qualify. In all these years, I'd only met 2. Anthony was the first. Oscar was the second. Actually, I didn't believe in marriage for fortune either. Modern medicine couldn't fix my illness, so how could vague metaphysics cure it? How could a stranger I'd never met bring me luck? My body would inevitably decay. But I didn't want to disappoint Oliver and Clara. So I let Anthony stay by my side all these years and accepted that engagement. Chapter 4. Memories were not comforting. My parents' wet, tear-heavy lashes had rained down within me again and again. I could only imprison that sad, wailing, painful self, lest such intense emotion utterly consume my fragile shell. I had long accepted my death, but I could not avoid being petty. I still wanted to live a little longer. At least long enough to keep Oliver and Clara company for a while. So the one who stood before them was always the cold, indifferent Freya. I looked at Oscar and said, "Don't call me benefactor and don't use the polite you. Young Mississippi, may I call you that?" He asked, tilting his head. "Do as you like." Oscar seemed as if he'd been granted some great favor. He was about to say something when a gust of wind blew through. He hurried backwards a step, turned and sneezed. Now he finally looked a little embarrassed. "Sorry, young miss." I looked at his damp hair. "You just took a cold water rinse?" "Yes," he said. I thought, when meeting you I shouldn't be rude. I was afraid I smelled. I interrupted him. "No hot water?" He nodded honestly. "Go dry your hair first, then let the butler teach you." I began, but seeing the hopeful look in his eyes, I fell silent for a few seconds and then said flatly, "Forget it. Come with me." I started showing Oscar around his room and the basic household fixtures. He learned very seriously, until his gaze fell on a row of wooden chairs and a thoughtful expression crossed his face. I asked, "What's wrong?" "These chairs aren't suitable for you." "They're too hard," Oscar replied. "I think this room should have a chair that lets young miss sit comfortably so when you come over you can rest." I paused. This had originally been Anthony's room. He liked such hard rosewood seats, and I rarely entered his room. Just then my phone rang. It was a message from Anthony. "I'll be at my own home tonight," he reported briefly. "Tell Uncle Martin I'll have him pick me up tomorrow morning." Uncle Martin was my driver and personal assistant. I suddenly remembered that an hour earlier I had wanted to go find Anthony and ask about him and Regina. I had intended to ask what he meant by saying to Regina, "You'll have to hide this with me for now. Don't let Freya find out." But now that the Lynn family no longer needed him, he would from now on be someone with whom I had nothing to do. I didn't reply. I just sent Uncle Martin a message. The butler had already issued notice canceling all of Anthony's privileges. He was no longer allowed to enter the Lynn residence. I added, "Don't pick Anthony up anymore." Then I looked at Oscar. "This is your room. Tell the butler if you want to change anything. Can I ask you about it?" He said. "Why ask me?" "Because he's preparing the chair for you. He's very earnest and needs young Mrs. approval." My tone remained cold. "Suit yourself." Oscar smiled again, the corners of his lips lifting clean and bright, as if some enormous happiness had struck his head. He must have remembered my schedule. After glancing at the clock on the wall, he knew I ought to rest. So he said, "See you tomorrow, young Mississippi MM." I hesitated, then said, "See you tomorrow." Chapter 05. That night I had a dream. I dreamed of Anthony as a child. Anthony had been raised in my family since he was little. The room next to mine was his. If he wanted to stay at the Lynn residence, he stayed. If he wanted to go home, he went home. Because of me, his allowances and treatment were top tier. The Lynn family's only requirement of him was, "Stay with me, soothe me, don't make me angry." Unsurprisingly, he had to stay by my side until my death and even marry me. We grew up together, attended the same schools, and sat in the same class. Nearly 10 years of childhood companionship. He was excellent in his studies, striking in appearance. An illustrious noble life had bred in him an aloof dignity, like a highland flower in the snow. Anthony was reserved and restrained. His emotions were not displayed, and every gesture carried a faint pride. That pride only relaxed in front of me. But even so, he merely followed the Lynn family's instructions and did nothing unnecessary. Our interactions were always as bland as water. He would accompany me for walks when the weather was nice, carry a book he recommended when we went to the library, and order a few dishes I liked when we ate together. And that was all. We hardly had anything to say. Perhaps the childhood Anthony once worried over how to win my favor, but when he discovered my emotions were always muted, almost never angry, he learned to live more easily. He wouldn't go to great lengths to make me happy, and of course he wouldn't spend extra time getting to know me. To him, I became more and more like a duty he had to bear, something he wanted to escape but couldn't. I didn't used to care. Because my body destined me to be unable to carry vivid, intense emotions, excitement, anger, pain, sorrow, I could not possess them. I was too fragile. No one dared get close. They couldn't bear the risk of me being hurt. I grew accustomed to Anthony's presence and companionship, and I indulged his aloofness, never angered by his occasional impatience or arrogance. To me, he was more a tool that gave my parents some psychological comfort. But I am flesh and blood after all. After 10 years side by side, I had invested one of the few feelings I could spare in Anthony. Regina was a special admit student. Her family was poor. She was always timid and pitiable. But she would, without hesitation on a rainy day, drop her umbrella to pick up a stray cat by the roadside. She would bounce over and invite him to play badminton. She would join the school party and dance elegantly. She was completely different from me, healthy and vivid. That was the first time I discovered Anthony could talk so much, that he would carefully learn someone's likes, that he would accompany someone to the movies, to claw machine stalls, up mountains to watch sunrises. He kept this affection hidden very well. But he was my fiancé, and the Lynn family watched his every move. So everything about him and Regina had long been laid before me. They even gave me the surveillance footage of the kiss after evening study. Regina sighed over how difficult Anthony's situation was and said with pity, "Freya, why must you bind him to you? Haven't you stolen his freedom for so many years?" Anthony was silent for a moment and then said, "Her health is poor. We must keep this hidden for now, Regina. I've suffered so long. Now I must trouble you. Once this is over, we will be free." They cuddled again, soft and intimate, like a pair of ill-fated lovers I had torn apart. I couldn't even call it anger. If that emotion surged up, I would be unable to breathe. I only had a faint curiosity. I wanted to ask him plainly, "Suffering? What do you mean by suffering?" Chapter 06, Spring Breeze. Academy. When Oscar followed me into the classroom, everyone froze. Then their faces showed astonishment, disbelief, and they began whispering among themselves. "Who's that? I've never seen him before. Huh? Why isn't it Anthony? Did the Lynn family change someone in? Damn it, why couldn't it have been me this time?" All my mom's fault for not giving birth to me at the right time. Can I try? I want to be the Lin Young Mrs. Marriage for Fortune lucky star too. I really want to see Anthony's expression. Perfect. The Lin Young Miss is finally tired of him. Oscar, noticing nearly the whole class staring at him, looked a little nervous at first but quickly relaxed. He said to me, "I will study hard." I didn't understand. Then he added, "I'll take first place. I'll never bring shame to young Mississippi." His voice was so devout it sounded like an oath. I was speechless. I watched as he moved a desk beside mine, then started cleaning my seat, top to bottom, inside and out, until it gleamed. The butler had told me that after I went to bed last night, Oscar had helped the auntie mop the floors, then helped the gardener trim branches, then jogged laps around the yard while reciting English aloud. At the end he even took out a little notebook and wrote something down. By chance I glimpsed it today and it was all about me. How long young Miss usually naps, what time she likes to take walks, what type of books she reads in the library. What kind of breakfast does she prefer? When does she take her medicine? In just a single page he had filled it with all these notes. This morning before dawn he was already up. After exercising he showered and began studying. Along the way, he helped the auntie prepare breakfast. The carrot flower on my plate today, he carved that. A bit rough but recognizable as a flower. Can a person really have such endless energy? I was puzzled. Don't you get tired? No, he said, finally pouring me a cup of hot water. He lifted his eyes and smiled at me. Doing these things makes me happy. I had seen countless people lie before. They wore masks, fawning, false, pretentious, full of calculated courtesy to please the Lin family, including Anthony. His concern often carried the undertone of impatience, of a grievance he had to swallow down. I could always tell, but I chose not to expose it. I didn't even have the energy to care about the truth buried in their hearts. It didn't matter. I wouldn't care. But I felt like I had never met someone like Oscar. He was like a spring rain from the mountains, untouched by the smog of the city, untouched by sudden storms or harsh snow. He didn't conceal himself when he spoke to me, didn't feel ashamed of his ignorance, didn't cover up anything. Every word he said was real. Chapter 07. The class bell rang. Report. Anthony arrived late, unhurried. Behind him trailed Regina, nearly out of breath. He looked a bit disheveled, but the very first thing his eyes found was me, or rather Oscar sitting at my side. Anthony froze. Confusion, disbelief, irritation and anger flickered across his face, only to be quickly suppressed. In the end, he merely sat down with a grim expression. Even when Regina timidly tugged at his sleeve, he ignored her. His deliberate disregard for me carried a trace of restless distraction. I paid no attention to his every move, not sparing him even a glance, because I was teaching Oscar how to use the electronic devices needed in class. He knew nothing, but he was clever. Even when he asked questions that sounded a little naive or lacking in common sense, he didn't come across as annoying. The first class was English listening practice. Oscar naturally shared one of his earphones with me. In the sunlight, his black hair gleamed with a soft golden sheen, and his smile was enough to lift one's spirits. The words of refusal caught in my throat. Normally, I never joined such tests or classroom drills. First, because studying consumed too much energy, everyone wanted me to rest. Even attending school like other people my age had been a decision my parents agonized over before agreeing. Second, because none of it was difficult for me. The English dialogues that sounded so obscure to Oscar, I could reproduce them word for word without effort. But Oscar didn't know this. He never assumed my difference was natural or taken for granted. When he looked at me, it wasn't as though I were fragile glass, nor as though I were a patient to be kept at arm's length, nor some anomaly to be placated. He was looking at me just Freya. Even when he called me young miss, there was no excess in his gaze, only clarity and sincerity. I paused for a few seconds, then accepted the earphone. The classroom exercise ended quickly. The foreign teacher stood at the podium speaking fluently. Oscar clearly couldn't keep up with the all-English teaching, but he was earnest, focused, his pen never stopping. Perhaps noticing the new student, the teacher warmly invited him to join in a role-play exercise. Her speech was fast, many of her linked sentences too hard for Oscar to follow. Now Oscar stood up, looking a little lost. He didn't understand what the teacher wanted. The classmates were surprised, but out of courtesy no one spoke. So in the silence a soft scoff sounded especially sharp. It was Anthony. Though he said nothing, the slight curve of his lips betrayed a quiet disdain, a scornful arrogance. Immediately after, he raised his hand and began conversing with the teacher. "Teacher, let me." Anthony's English was a perfectly polished London accent learned from my former tutor. "This new student can't even understand your words. What you're asking of him is beyond his ability." His tone was calm, but the mockery was unmistakable. Regina tugged uneasily at his sleeve, but Anthony paid her no mind. His eyes were locked onto Oscar as though staring at an enemy of life and death. Yet Oscar did not react as he expected. No shame, no humiliation. He had always been calm about his own ignorance, never letting such things wound his pride. He only looked a little embarrassed and in a low voice asked me, "Young miss, did I embarrass you?" I shook my head, then raised my hand as well. "Teacher," I said softly, "I'll be his partner." The foreign teacher's face lit up with delight. "Really? That's wonderful." Oscar turned to look at me. "She's inviting you to perform a short dialogue," I explained, suppressing the faint itch in my throat as I lowered my eyes. "I'll do it with you." The teacher spoke far too quickly. Oscar might not keep up. All the more since Anthony was clearly trying to embarrass him. There was no way I could sit by and watch. But I had never before volunteered to join in such classroom activities. This was the first time. Oscar didn't know that. Anthony did. His expression froze. For some reason, after deliberately avoiding my gaze, his eyes returned to me. His handsome features filled with disbelief. In that moment, he nearly lost his composure, even rising to his feet to say coldly to the teacher, "Don't you know Freya's health isn't suited for this kind of activity?" The teacher faltered, looking startled and awkward. She was new this semester. Other teachers had surely mentioned my condition, but to her, this was just a small classroom role play, especially since I had volunteered myself. "Freya?" She looked at me uncertainly. I frowned slightly and ignored Anthony. "I can. Let's begin." Anthony's face turned deathly pale. His lips moved as if to speak, but his pride forced him silent. He could only sit back down, unwilling. The scene was an excerpt from a British drama. I slowed the pace, simplifying the awkward, difficult lines into basic structures. Oscar could understand. His spoken English was far from perfect, but his voice was pleasant, his tone earnest and intent. When it ended smoothly, the teacher applauded first. After sitting down, Oscar turned to me, his eyes bright with admiration. "Young miss, you're amazing." I wanted to say it was nothing, but after a pause I changed my words. "You'll be able to do it too. I'll hire him a good English tutor when we get home," I thought. Chapter 08. The cafeteria at Spring Breeze had 5 floors. The 5th floor had been reserved by my parents exclusively for me. Each day, nutritionists and chefs designed a personalized menu with a small buffet area as well. It was essentially my private lounge. Some classmates who were close to me or whose families had business ties with mine were occasionally allowed up to the 5th floor. Oscar and I sat by the window. A few students came up, greeting us warmly. Their curious glances skimmed over Oscar, but without offense. They seemed to envy me. Oscar looked up at me, his eyes clear and bright, smiling. "Because I get to sit across from young miss while eating." My tone was flat. "That's nothing to envy. Anthony never liked eating with me. Perhaps because I ate very slowly and my food was always bland, making it unappetizing for others. Perhaps because I was dull with little to say, giving no reason for anyone to want to share things with me. Or perhaps because he was always trying to accommodate me, to agree with me, until the act of eating lost all joy." Oscar froze. He studied me for a long moment, then asked in confusion, "That's not worth envying?" The next second he realized what he just said, and his ears instantly turned red. Even when mocked in class, he had never shown embarrassment, but now he seemed flustered, as if he had committed some grave offense. But perhaps he was simply incapable of lying. His words tumbled out, halting and unclear. "Because it looks nice. It makes me feel happy." What looks nice? I was slow to react but eventually understood what he meant. Like wind rippling across the lake's surface. The unspoken silence lingered for several seconds. We both lowered our heads and continued eating. Chapter 09. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the entrance. Anthony was leading Regina upstairs. Both seemed to have recovered their good moods. Anthony no longer carried the irritation of the morning, and his eyes held a fond indulgence as he listened to Regina's chatter. You said you've never tried seafood stew in a clay pot. The fifth-floor buffet always has some ready. I'll let you try it. Really? Great. Regina stuck out her tongue playfully. But I only want a taste. Maybe those expensive dishes aren't even as good as the spicy street food outside. Anthony chuckled. If you don't like it, we'll go eat spicy hot pot outside. But they were stopped at the door. The cafeteria manager politely said, The fifth floor isn't open to the public. Please use another floor. Anthony froze. Do you know who I am? He demanded, incredulous. The manager's polite smile did not waver. You don't have the clearance to enter the fifth floor. Anthony's face darkened instantly. You should know what my relationship with Freya is. Is that so? The manager's smile faded slightly, his eyes flicking meaningfully toward Regina, whose expression had stiffened. I've received notice. Your engagement with Miss Lynn has been dissolved. Therefore, your clearance has been revoked. Anthony's face went blank. Slowly he asked, What did you just say? At that, Regina's expression lit with surprise, though she quickly masked it, sneaking a cautious glance at Anthony. You'll receive notice very soon, the manager said courteously. I don't believe it. Anthony nearly blurted, then forced a thin smile. I'll ask her myself. You've received false information. But the manager stood his ground. Please use another floor to dine. As the two argued, the staff on the fifth floor turned their eyes toward Anthony, looks full of scrutiny. Someone even snickered. At last, it was Regina who broke under the stares. She tugged Anthony's sleeve and whispered, Anthony, let's just go eat spicy hot pot. Forget it. I thought those things didn't look very tasty anyway. But Anthony didn't budge. He had always been pampered and respected everywhere he went. To lose face in front of Regina, how could he let it go? Think carefully, he said, regaining his breath, his tone edged with threat. I am the heir of the Sun family. You're just a lowly employee who bows to the powerful. Whether you even keep this job depends on a single word from me. Are you threatening me? The manager's smile disappeared completely. Calm and unyielding, he said. Even if you're the Sun family's young master, I work for the Lin family. I only obey their orders. The onlookers grew in number, their stares pressing. Anthony's patience seemed spent. You'd better understand the consequences of what you're doing. Miss Lin revoked your access to this dining hall, the manager said coldly. You are not allowed in today. Chapter 10. While they were speaking, I had already walked to the doorway. What consequences does she need to consider, Miss Lin? The manager hurried to greet me, his voice tinged with apology. Forgive me for disturbing your meal. I shook my head. You did well. Go back to your work. Then I raised my eyes toward Anthony. Anthony, she's an employee of the Lin family working for me. If she refuses you entry, on what grounds do you think you can take away her job? Freya, I was only upset she was spreading those rumors. Anthony's tone softened unconsciously, but when his gaze fell on Oscar at my side, it cooled again. I meant to ask this morning. Why didn't the driver pick me up? And who is he? I am your fiancé after all. Don't you owe me an explanation, Anthony? I cut him off. She wasn't lying. The engagement has been dissolved. What? You no longer need to come to the Lin residence, I said flat and emotionless. You are free in advance. Anthony was stunned. Then suddenly, he gave a harsh laugh, pointing at Oscar with rising fury. It's because of him, isn't it? Because you found a replacement. You discarded me without hesitation. Freya, do you even have a heart? Noisy, clueless, tone-deaf. In the past, my patience had been abundant. I seldom grew angry. Anger wasn't worth it, and I didn't care about petty details. But that did not mean I would endure him shouting at me. Even if I tolerated it, my parents would not. I coughed lightly twice, about to speak, yet Oscar spoke first. Young miss, his head bowed, his voice low and sincere. If I strike him here, will it trouble you? The shadow over my mood vanished in an instant, like clouds parting. No, I said. Almost as soon as the word left my lips, Oscar's fist slammed into Anthony. Though he seemed slender, Oscar had grown up in the mountains, hauling water, chopping firewood, washing, cooking, and carrying his brother on his back to hospitals and school. His strength was astonishing. In an instant, Regina's shriek, Anthony's cry of pain, and the gasps of onlookers tangled together. It was a one-sided suppression, completely overturning the image I had of Oscar. Anthony was pinned hard to the ground, his neck gripped as if he were a gazelle in the jaws of a fierce hound, choking in terror. Oscar's smile was gone, his face blank, revealing a ruthless ferocity. Of course, a boy raised in the wild countryside, born with such striking looks, forced to care alone for a sick grandfather and little brother. If he had no sharp edges, he would have long been devoured with nothing left. Spring rain is always accompanied by a chill wind. The scene frightened everyone. Everyone but me. Because once Oscar subdued Anthony, he didn't move again. He only turned back to look at me, waiting obediently for my word. The fierce youth who moments before looked like a devil now lowered his gaze. His stern expression gentled. When he looked up again, there was no trace of hostility. It made my fingertips itch. It made me want to reach out and pat his head. In the past, I had never liked solving problems with violence. But this feeling, unexpectedly, was not unpleasant. Anthony, who allowed you to speak to me like that? I reached for the glass of water at hand and slowly poured it over his head. Are you awake now? Regina beside him was clearly terrified. She didn't dare make a sound. She seemed to judge the situation more clearly than Anthony did, only able to weep softly on the side, murmuring for us to stop while helplessly watching the crystal water flow down. Drenched, Anthony looked as though he had woken from a dream, finally realizing where he was. Rationality returned along with fear. He tried to soften. Freya, I'm sorry, I just don't understand. Why was the engagement suddenly dissolved? Even if you found someone to replace me, what about all these years of feelings? All these years of feelings. I repeated the phrase, my tone cold. But in your eyes, they were nothing more than a burden you had to carry. There was no feeling. Anthony's face went pale. No, it's not like that. I never thought that way. Freya, I was wrong, I apologize. The manager handed me another glass of water. I lowered my eyes. Hush. His false confession was revolting. I poured again slowly. Was it the Sun family that gave you such confidence? My gaze fell on Regina. The confidence to tell her that once I die, you too would finally be free. The air turned heavy and silent. Anthony's expression had gone beyond ugly. He was panicked, darting glances at the crowd as though searching for help yet utterly powerless to explain. Instead, it was Regina who, as if summoning all her courage, stepped forward. Lynn. Miss Lynn. I know Anthony has an engagement with you, but he doesn't love you. You've tied him to you for so many years, that should be enough. Besides, you've already found someone to replace him. Now that you've discovered everything, why not let him go? I already have let him go, I said. My tone was weary, unwilling to waste more effort on this farce. The engagement is dissolved. Your relationship has nothing to do with me. Regina blinked, stunned. Then carefully she asked, Then will you come after us later? I froze, looked at both her and Anthony seriously, and spoke my honest thought. Are you too important enough for that? A chuckle. Among the onlookers, someone laughed first. Then another and another. How could Miss Lynn ever waste her energy on you? Go act in some tragic drama. No one cares. Malicious and stupid. Don't know your place.